BYU basketball coach Kevin Young popularized the phrase stacking days this past season. I'm going to modify it and say, how about they just keep stacking recruits?
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As always, a big thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers right now at FanDuel get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Go to FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about BYU's success on the recruiting trail in football. Then we'll talk about another high-level transfer portal target the BYU basketball program is hot on the heels of in Kennard Davis Jr. And we'll finish up today's show with our weekly mailbag segment from our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, so right at the outset of this conversation, BYU is absolutely rocking and rolling in the 2026 recruiting cycle. If you didn't see the news yesterday, BYU added their second top 100 recruit of the 2026 cycle when Bott Mulitalo of Lone Peak High School officially announced that he's committed to the BYU Cougars. Now, Bott is a star, a four-star prospect, ranked 90th in the country overall and third overall in the state of Utah. He was an absolute mauler on the defensive line the past couple of seasons for Lone Peak. And that's where a lot of people had thought he was going to project to the next level as a 6'4", 290, 300-pound defensive tackle. Well, he stunned everybody when just about a month ago, he announced he was decommitting from Oregon, who he had committed to previously, and announced he's also making a position change. He was switching over to playing offensive line with the whole thought of developing into an offensive tackle. He expressed to 24/7 Sports that he looked at guys like Penei Sewell as heroes of his at the professional level, and he hoped to emulate them. And now he's making that transition, and he will do it as a BYU Cougar. It is a monster pickup for the BYU Cougars, because I have said it often on this podcast. I'm not the only one. I know guys like Jeff Hansen over at Cougar Sports Insider, who I consider to be one of, if not the most preeminent voice in BYU recruiting chatter. He has said this as well. The 2026 recruiting cycle might be the most important, but also the most promising in BYU football history. Why? Well, simply put, there is a bumper crop of elite talent that have connections either A, to BYU, B, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or C, they are just out and out star football players that BYU needs to have if they want to climb to the top of the Big 12 conference and be a conference contender. Well, the good news is BYU is capitalizing on it so far. Recently, they added Brock Harris, who, much like Bott Mulitalo, is a top 100 prospect. The best part about Brock and Bott are they are local prospects. Now, Brock comes from a little further away down in St. George, but Bott's 30 minutes away up in Alpine, Utah, I guess, is that Highland where Lone Peak's at? But regardless, the point remains. They are keeping elite talent home and playing for the BYU Cougars. It wasn't that long ago that the University of Utah held the upper hand when it came to recruiting guys like this in state, because they had that Power 5 association with their name. BYU, since joining the Big 12 Conference, has made major inroads when it comes to recruiting. They often said on the recruiting trail before joining the Big 12 Conference that they were a Power 5 adjacent team. They're playing as strong, like I said, a Power 5 adjacent schedule as they could muster, as good of a schedule they could muster. Well, now they legitimately are a Power 4 program, and they are benefiting from it by keeping guys like a Bott Mulitalo home. Brock Harris and Bott had offers clear across this country. Bott had offers to USC, Oregon, I think Auburn was among them. He could have named essentially anywhere he wanted to play in this country. And he decided he wants to come 20, 30 minutes south on I-15 and play for the BYU Cougars. BYU, as I said, needs to capitalize on this 2026 recruiting cycle, and so far they are. For example, to kind of back this up, BYU last year in the 2025 recruiting class finished 55th in the country, which is an uptick for BYU traditionally. They finished 55th in the 24/7 sports rankings with 23 commits, 20 of them 3 stars, 1 4-star, and an overall average rating amongst their prospects of 86.26. Now, the 2026 cycle has literally just kind of getting its infancy in many respects. But BYU is already ranked 33rd in that class. They have 2, so more than they already had in terms of 4-star prospects committed in this class. And the overall rating for BYU amongst their 7 commits is 88.92. If that number holds anywhere near that, that will be the highest rated top to bottom class in BYU football recruiting history. That is how good of talent is out there. And BYU is already scooping it up. I am ecstatic that Kalani Sitake and his staff, led by guys like offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick, defensive coordinator Jay Hill, the position coaches across the board, the recruiting assistants, everybody involved, I think they wholly understand the magnitude of what this 2026 recruiting cycle could mean for BYU's future prospects. Some of these guys, yeah, they will go on missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You won't see them for 2 or 3 years. Other guys will come in immediately and should be impactful players to help BYU stay near, if not at the top of the Big 12 Conference. BYU's got aspirations of being that big dog, this term that we've been talking a lot on my radio station, the KSL Sports Zone, because Rondo Felberg, former BYU athletic director, said that BYU doesn't want to crow that they are the big dog in the conference. They want other people to say it for them. And they're well on their way to doing that. I think what BYU is showing right now is that they are a force to be reckoned with now that A, they have the power for association. B, they have had major success on the football field this past year. Look at that 11-2 season and tell me that has not helped BYU's chances. BYU is absolutely to use the term, a cool school to play for once again. There are many years it was not that way for the BYU Cougars. And then the final thing I'll say is BYU has brought their NIL to bear. Now, that will change with regards to the House settlement if and when that is adopted, settled, and it's figured out. But so far, BYU is hitting every single high note when it comes to their recruiting success. And if they continue on the pace they are on, it will without a doubt be the type of recruiting haul that BYU needs to be a Big 12 contender, if not win a Big 12 title. And they very well could win a Big 12 title this year without the guys that are in the 2026 recruiting cycle. Remember, the guys who are committing right now, the earliest they can sign is this December. And then ultimately, some of them may enroll next January as early enrollees. Some may not enroll for at least 3 years due to missions and other associated issues with that. So it's a very, very interesting time for BYU, but Kalani and his staff, I think, have seized the moment in many respects, and Bott Mulitalo is just the latest in a long line of success so far for BYU in this recruiting cycle. I will unabashedly say that Bott is my personal favorite of the commits so far in this class because I've had a chance to watch him up close. I've called games for the KSL Rewind network that we do high school games every Friday night. I've been at Lone Peak. I've watched Bott. Now, I haven't seen him as an offensive lineman because we have not seen him take the field playing offensive line, but he is a one-man wrecking crew on the defensive line. And if he brings that same mentality to playing offensive tackle, the sky's the limit for this young man. And I am excited to see him in Cougar Blue. I was disappointed he was originally planning on going out of state to suit up for the Oregon Ducks. I am ecstatic that he's staying home, and he's going to be a part of what appears to be an absolutely epic recruiting class for BYU that very well could prove to be the type of class that could kind of push BYU in to their next phase of football, and that is contending for Big 12 crowns, playing in Big 12 title games, playing in the college football playoff, and pushing for a national title. That's all what BYU aspires to get to, and this year's recruiting class could be the launching point for BYU to do just that. All right, BYU basketball is not about to be left out, though. Some news coming out that BYU is hot on the heels of a mid-major star that has loads of potential in him, and the best part is has multiple years potentially remaining with regards to his transfer portal status. Who is Kennard Davis Jr., and what could he offer to the BYU basketball program? There's a whole lot to like, and we'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Yeah, I'm serious about this. Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with the Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Just grab your paired controller. Subscribers sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. You can play games like EA Sports, College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops, or Avowed, and hundreds more. And as easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. But my favorite part about this, my friends, is many of us might be traveling and you want to take your games with you. The best part is you can take your high quality Xbox games and play them at a fraction of the cost without having to have your console with you. A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easy to travel with you, allowing you to take your kids or the game systems wherever you go, because you just got to plug it in and off you go. So the best part is you can head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started today. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. It's available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generations, and Fire TV Cube third generations. But once again, get started today by heading to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well on this Friday. Have some fun weekend plans ahead of you. NFL draft ongoing. Looking forward to seeing if and when guys like Tyler Batty and Caleb Etienne are taken. We'll obviously have updates for you guys as those roll in over the weekend if they do happen, and obviously a full recap of where other players like a Connor Pay, Jacob Robinson, and the like sign likely in free agency. We'll do that on our Monday edition of the show. All right. Let's talk BYU basketball. Now, Kevin Young is still obviously sorting out his roster. At last count, and this obviously could change from the second I record this podcast, but at last count, BYU has 5 open roster slots, and that is assuming that Richie Saunders is going to return to play for the BYU Cougars this fall. I have heard nothing but positive signs towards that, speaking of Richie returning, but ultimately he will have to announce that in its official capacity if and when he decides to do so. But BYU is not resting, and they're out there, in fact, looking harder than ever to fill out this roster. And they may have found what I think is a highly underrated player. Now, a number of you out there were hoping that BYU is going to be capable of adding Darian Williams from Texas Tech. And I also was right there with you. If BYU were capable of bringing in a guy who was an all Big 12 caliber player and proved that for Texas Tech this past year, I would have been absolutely over the moon to have him come in. Did they discover, and are they going to be hosting a guy who may be Darian Williams light or Darian Williams-esque? Well, let me introduce you guys to Kennard Davis Jr. He's a sophomore from St. Louis, Missouri. This past 2 seasons has been playing for the Southern Illinois Salukis in the Missouri Valley Conference, and has been a really fine player. After a pretty quiet debut as a freshman, he played all 32 games in 23-24, averaging 21 minutes per game, averaged 4.2 points per game, along with 3 rebounds and just about an assist. This past year, though, saw an uptick to 34.1 minutes over 32 games played. The shooting percentages jumped from 41.7 to 45.5%. More importantly, his three-point percentage from his freshman to sophomore campaign jumped by a full 7.5 points from 30% to 37.6%. And associated with that, a major uptick in scoring, 16.3 points per game. He ultimately went on to be a Missouri Valley Conference second-team honoree, also was part of their most improved team honors, and led his team in scoring along with that 3-point percentage. Just a sophomore, obviously has multiple years potentially remaining on the table, and at 6'6", 215 pounds, he is a walking mismatch on the wing. He's got the height, obviously, to dominate smaller guards, and has shown that he can shoot it from the perimeter, but with 215 pounds on a really long frame, that means he's more than capable of also dominating guys in the paint and scoring at will there. His effective field goal percentage is very, very high. I know some of you out there, Travis, I know you're going to be barking at me about this. Effective field goal percentage this past year in the Missouri Valley Conference, 53.7%. And if you want an example, that's a pretty elite number. Effective field goal percentage combines your 3-point percentages, and that's a really solid number in terms of effective field goal percentage. And the other thing I like to look at when you look at guys like this coming from the mid-major level, you want to see how they perform against the best competition they faced on the season. I went through Southern Illinois' record. They ended up finishing 14-19, so nothing to write home about as a team, because sub 500 record's never great. But they played 2 Power 5 opponents this past season, one of which is a common opponent with BYU. That's the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Now, Oklahoma State was not, I would say, great, because they were kind of starting off a new era there in Stillwater, and they did beat Southern Illinois 85-78 in Stillwater. But in that game, Kennard Davis Jr., 37 minutes, 6 of 12 from the field overall, 3 of 7 from 3, scores 16 points, adds 5 rebounds, 5 assists, had a steal, and 2 turnovers. That's a great stat line. Then later on, play it against the national champions, Florida Gators. They went down to Gainesville, and you want to say, okay, how did he perform against the reigning national champions? Well, a pretty solid game, even though they got absolutely dominated 93-68. Kennard Davis Jr. did his part. In 32 minutes, he was 4 of 11 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3, scoring 11 points. Once again, 5 rebounds, only 1 assist in this game, 1 steal. Did have 4 turnovers. I think that those turnover numbers, they may seem a tad bit high because overall in the season, they're not great. He averaged 2.3 turnovers per game. But when you're the leading player, if not the star player for your team at that level, well, you're going to be hounded a lot more, and turnovers are inevitably going to become a part of your repertoire at that point. I think Kennard Davis Jr. is a fantastic option for BYU if they can land him. Now, he's got a ton of options out there when it comes to the transfer portal, as you might expect. You don't see guys who are 6'6", 215, maybe 220 pounds, who are a walking mismatch, like I said, in the mold of a Darian Williams, because what Darian Williams was is his capability of playing inside out, and doesn't matter what the matchup was. If he had a guy who was a little bit bigger than him, maybe a little bit slower, he'd take him out to the perimeter and either jack a 3 over them and hit it, or he would beat him off the dribble and go to the rim and score. We saw that when BYU played Texas Tech. But also, if he got a 6'3" guard on him, what did Darian Williams do? He started backing him down with his height and weight combo, and what I see from Kennard Davis Jr. here is, like I said, a Darian Williams-esque player who is a mismatch that Kevin Young would absolutely relish, trying to draw up things to make him as effective of a player as he possibly could make him. The other part about it is he is a leader. He's obviously got chops in terms of being a leader, having played now 64 career games at the Division I level. He would come in and be a veteran voice, and we hear often from coaches, and Kevin Young has said it, that you want to get old and stay old. BYU will always have premier talents that are going to be young, one-and-doneers, like an A.J. DeBonsa coming in. And they're going to be that alpha for the BYU basketball team. But you want guys around him who obviously understand their role, buy into said role, and when things are not going well, like they often do for a freshman in certain circumstances, those veteran voices can speak up, also can take over the game, and take a little bit of the pressure off of a DeBonsa. I love what Richie Saunders offers, presuming he comes back. But Kennard Davis Jr., man, of all of the options out there on the market that BYU is chasing, and they're reportedly supposed to be having him coming on a visit very, very soon. I have been told as soon as today, speaking of Friday, he could be in Provo, Utah on a visit. This it seems like a perfect fit for what Kevin Young and the BYU basketball program are trying to build. Yes, I know some of you are going to be screaming at me, they still need to get a big man, Jake. Well, we talked about some of the big men that they're also pursuing. The other side of it is they still have 4 roster slots, and I expect that BYU will be combing the international market, going over to Europe and the like, and they probably bring a big man from overseas if need be to bolster that front line. Keba Keita is obviously going to be your number 1, and that's a bit of an impediment with bringing in, I think, a premier big man and saying, hey, you want to come in and be a backup? Like, that's not a very compelling pitch. Now, NIL money, that can change the conversation. We know that BYU is willing to fork over cash if they need to. But I really like going back to the premise here, the Kennard Davis Jr., he seems like the perfect weapon to have on BYU's roster. And I would project if he picks BYU, he's likely to start at that 4 spot, maybe freeing up A.J. DeBonsa and Richie Saunders to be your 2 and 3 men primarily, alongside Robert Wright III, who Robert Wright III's got to be just licking his chops thinking, all right, give me these weapons, let me dribble, drive, penetrate, and let's really mess some people up. I love the versatility of this lineup already. And if you add a Kennard Davis Jr. to the mix, it gets that much more dangerous and that much more fun, in my mind, on paper to watch this team. It's already going to be must-watch television for BYU basketball next year, but I think Kennard Davis Jr. might be that link that could really be a big part of pushing BYU from the Sweet 16 to an Elite 8 to a Final Four type contender. And I think he's looking potentially at the options and saying, hey, that's a role that I could carve out for myself that BYU doesn't have on the roster right now. And obviously you have to play defense. But I think knowing what I have been reading up on this kid about, he seems like what I would think would be an ideal fit for KYU and company to have in the program this coming season and going forward. All right, we will finish up today's show with as many questions as we can stuff into our mailbag segment, and we'll get to those next. A lot of good ones, football, basketball, and even some off the beaten path type topics. And we'll delve into those as we wrap up this Friday edition of Locked On Cougars next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, my friends, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel, you can place your first $5 bet, get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. It's as simple as that. The best part is FanDuel makes it super easy to bet on whatever game or games you're watching, whether it's picking your favorite team, you're diving into player props. Best part is from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many different ways to bet on your favorite player props or team props as well. And I will also insert, no matter what your sport is, even if it's not basketball, they've got baseball, futures on NFL and college football. And the best part is after every game tips off, you can combine your live prop bets into a same game parlay for an extra chance to win even bigger payouts. So don't miss out on your chance to win, and go to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Once again, that's FanDuel.com to get started with our friends over at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing great out there. All right. If you want to ask questions in our Locked On Cougars Insider Group segment, you have to be a member of Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Well, Jake, how do I join? Well, there's a link in the show notes below. It's a 14-day free trial. Let's see if it's the right option for you. And it's just $5 a month afterwards to stay in the know about everything I am hearing about BYU sports. Locked On Cougars Insider Group members are getting the inside scoop before anybody else. Before this podcast goes out to the general public, they're getting it coming to the phones in the form of a text message. So I'd encourage you to join us today and get that inside scoop. All right. Question time. Jake asked this question. What are the odds LJ Martin rushes for 1,000 yards this year? I would say 35-ish%. We need to see LJ stay healthy for a full year. I think a lot of people bag on LJ because he's been injured so often, and that obviously is a concern. But I think if you get a fully healthy season at LJ, he's capable of going for the 1K mark. I really believe that, but we've got to see him stay healthy. So I will say right now, 35%. He also asked this, who's going to replace Connor Pay? Well, that's going to be Bruce Mitchell. Yes, Bruce has been running with the ones all spring long, and I actually have an interview with him I need to play on this podcast. I got a few of them stacked up. We just have had so much news. I haven't had a chance to get to all of these, and we'll get to them. But Bruce was really, really pointed in saying, no, I'm the guy at that pivot position, speaking of the center position, and I think it's really fun to see him embracing what's going on with BYU basketball, and I look forward to seeing how he develops in time. Next question, Scott. When can I get you down to come down and go golfing with me at Spanish Oaks? It's on me. Well, Scott, if it's on you, anytime, we'll figure it out. I love to golf. And if you want to go golfing, hit me up. I'd love for you guys to bring it in. Luke Jorgensen just wanted to ask about BYU basketball's potential to add Kennard Davis Jr. Okay, we actually talked about this. He says that adding him to BYU's 2025 class projections-wise would raise them to the number 2 spot in the class rankings. Okay, that's a little bit of a tidbit to add to what we talked about Kennard Davis Jr. His addition would absolutely push BYU into elite territory. That is awesome. Jackson, what is your potential starting 5 for the season? I think I already talked about it earlier on the podcast, but it's Robert Wright III, Richie Saunders, AJ DeBonsa, and if all goes well, I think Kennard Davis Jr. is your starting 4-man, and there's Keba Keita as your 5. Now, maybe not the biggest lineup in the world, but the versatility there, I love it. I think Kevin Young would have a lot of fun with that. Mark, how big is Bott Mulitalo? Last number I heard, he's 6'4", 280, 290 pounds, but he is going to bulk up. He is expecting to play probably north of 300 pounds, and we'll see at 6'4" if he can really become an offensive tackle at the Division I level, because we've seen some offensive tackles recently at BYU. They're all like 6'8", 6'9". They prefer those tall offensive tackles, but that doesn't mean a 6'4" guy couldn't do it. But I don't care where Bott plays. He is an elite athlete, and he brings a violence to the offensive side of the football that will serve him well as an offensive lineman. Carter, are there any BYU or Utah players likely to enter the portal and go to their rival? Well, the portal closes tonight. Now, let's reiterate, you can enter the portal today, and it can take up to 48 hours or 2 full business days. So that would technically be as late as next Tuesday before official word goes out that you're actually in the portal, or the school officially informs you you're in the portal. Do I expect BYU players to go in the portal and go to Utah? No, I do not at this juncture. Could I be wrong about that? Absolutely. Harrison Taggart could go to Utah. That would, I think, answer your question there. Now, speaking of Utah players, there's rumors out there, but until guys actually enter the portal, I am not going to speculate on it because it just doesn't seem like it serves me any purpose to be like, hey, I've heard about this guy. It serves me no good to speculate like that because all it does is make certain fan bases very angry. All right. Next question. Donovan, do you think the football team has a good chance to go to the college football playoff? I'd like to say yes, but Donovan, they've got to prove they can get past the Kansas type performances this season. If they can maintain consistency, yes, they have a chance to do it. And we'll see what happens, but they do have that chance. They're going to be one of the favorites to win the Big 12 conference this year. And with that, obviously, is an expectation you go to the Big 12 title game and obviously a chance to play in the playoff if you win that game in Arlington. I want to see it happen. And if they do make it, I'll make you a promise right now, guys. I'll be traveling wherever BYU is playing in the college football playoff. I have been stacking away shekels over the months and years to travel to events like this. You guys know I've been to Big 12 Media Day. I went to BYU's first ever Big 12 game at Kansas. I want to go to big moments for BYU football. I want to go to the Big 12 title game. I want to go to the college football playoff and watch BYU play, and I hope they make it. Daniel, any update on JoJo Phillips? There was reports that he was going to hit the portal. I don't think I've seen anything from him. I'll be blunt. I expected him to hit the portal. I had heard that he was going to, but I think Keelan Marion preempting him and jumping in the portal of his own volition, I think has JoJo Phillips maybe considering, or at least heavily considering, remaining with BYU because that opens up reps. And I would say with Keelan Marion out of the mix, I would say that your starting trio of wide receivers, because BYU lists usually a trio of starting wide receivers, would be Chase Roberts, JoJo Phillips, and Parker Kingston at slot. I think those would be your starting three. And JoJo's got to be considering that, saying, hey, shouldn't we be considering that? Let's see. Other questions coming in here. Let's get through as many as we can. Landon, how much more tampering until we get all of Utah's players? A lot more, Landon. They're going to have to tamper a whole lot more. Should I be speculating like that? Maybe not, but I couldn't resist. That's a great question there. Other questions here. Stephen Fellows. Mel Kiper obviously didn't watch the Alamo Bowl last year. Shedeur Sanders consistently came up big in big games last year. If you did not see the tongue bath that Mel Kiper was giving Shedeur Sanders last night during the NFL draft's first round, absolutely nuts. He was irate that Jackson Dart went to the New York Giants. The fact that the New York Giants sent their ownership to watch Shedeur Sanders work out and then pass on him not once, but twice. He was the most heavily scouted in terms of quarterbacks by the New York Giants, who were projected to take him. And they, passed on him early on in the first round, then traded back in to the back end of the first round to take Jackson Dart over him. That might be just a little bit of an indictment of but what the NFL thinks of Shedeur Sanders. Now, 33rd pick tonight, the second round of the NFL draft. I would place a decent wager on Shedeur Sanders going to Cleveland because they also have, I think, the fourth pick of the second round. Cleveland needs a quarterback, and Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback remaining on the board in my mind. We'll see what happens here. Guy also adds this: 5 offensive tackles taken in the first round. Maybe that gives Caleb a chance in the later rounds. Caleb Etienne put on a performance, a really, really strong performance at Big 12 Pro Days, and you're right. Offensive tackles coming off the board early is a good sign that there's going to be a run on them potentially, and it obviously could open up an opportunity for Caleb to go in the latter rounds. If he goes any earlier in the 5th round, I'll be floored, but I hope that Caleb hears his name called. I also hope that Tyler Batty hears his name called. I think they're the two most deserving. I also am a homer and think that Jacob Robinson deserves to have his name called, but it doesn't look like that's going to be in the cards here for BYU. All right. Let's see. We're running out of time here. How much time we got left? Oh, I got to wrap up. So final question. We'll give it to Tyson, and we'll get any other questions that come straggling and we may get to early next week. He says this: with all of BYU's recent attraction of top talent in football and basketball, what is your level of concern that the ghosts of the Croton years, are at risk of returning? Now, he's referring to the off-the-field issues that plagued Gary Croton during his 3-year run as BYU football head coach. I understand there's some concern with that, with a lot of guys who may not be fully familiar with BYU's honor code, are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, may not fully understand in many respects what they're getting into, at least in thought, coming to Provo, Utah. But I can assure you of one thing, Tyson. Everything that I understand about Kalani Sitake in particular is that he is exceedingly blunt about what the honor code entails and what it is requiring of these young men. And I've heard similar sentiments expressed about Kevin Young. Now, Kalani obviously played at BYU. He knows what it takes to be a student athlete at BYU. Kevin Young did not play at BYU, but as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if I recall, his wife was a student at BYU. I think he understands BYU will not tolerate, let's say, hijinks when it comes to his athletes. Is there potential for a slip up and guys doing something stupid? Absolutely there is. They're young men. I don't think that people understand that. Chris Peterson said that the age group of 18 to 25-year-old young men is the dumbest age group in America. He said that on the record into a mic on my radio station many years ago when he was coaching the Washington Huskies. It has never been a more true statement. I, as an 18 to 25-year-old, was a complete knucklehead, and I was a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I served a mission, all that type of stuff. But here's the thing. They're young men, and stuff happens. I know these coaches are going to be just plead with these young men. Be smart. Do the right things. Abide by the honor code. And I sincerely hope, we don't have, you said, the ghost of the Gary Croton era come back to haunt BYU. But I know that these coaches, at least the head coaches of the football and basketball programs, they are faithful members of the faith. And I think they're being very clear and direct with these young men, saying this honor code it's no joke. It is something you have to adhere to if you want to be at BYU. And I think the other thing is they can point to a track record of guys who, when you live by the principles of the honor code, it's a distraction-free zone that allows you to focus on what you ultimately want to accomplish as an athlete. And that is becoming the best version of yourself that you possibly can become. And obviously going to the NBA in basketball or going to the NFL in football. That's the best pitch, I think, for the honor code out there. A lot of distractions exist in the world, and a lot of them are prohibited by the honor code. And I think if a young man can understand that side of it and coaches can help them see that light, as it were, it's a really, really, I think, compelling pitch. Some guys aren't going to like it, and I understand that. There's thousands of young men that they want to experience what the world can throw at you. Great. BYU's not like that. BYU, they adhere to their principles. They adhere to what they espouse to be. And the athletes that represent BYU are expected to measure up in concert with that. All right. I will step off the soapbox and wrap it up with that final thought. But I have more questions that came in than I ever have a chance to get to, but we are out of time. So as always, appreciate all of your guys' support. We'll have coverage this weekend of the NFL draft. If and when guys hear their names called from BYU, we'll have YouTube shorts up and the like stuff on social media for you guys. But once again, as always, truthfully, appreciate all your guys' patronage, your support. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share this podcast with your family and friends if they don't know about it already. But once again, as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.